Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
This is episode number 211, and the title today is How to Prep Low Motivation Type Students for the SAT. It's Alexis Avila, Prepped and Polished podcast, your host. If you need tutoring in person or online, you can call us, 781-753-9951, or visit our site, preppedandpolished.com. And also, when you're at our site, a chat box appears, and if you have a question or reaction during or after this podcast, feel free to send us a question, and we'll get back to you immediately. Let's get right to it. How to prep low motivation type students for the SAT. Low motivation, low energy students tend to look at the SAT as boring. They're not interested. They're lethargic about the situation, ambivalent about the situation, depressed about the situation, and it's up to you, the tutor or the parent or yourself, and yourself, of course, especially, because let's just pretend you're the low motivation student, to prepare for the SAT and do your best on it. So first, you want to consider a one-to-one tutoring approach versus a group lecture-based approach. So the lecture-based approach will just it'll take you off your game, and a one-to-one, you'll be held more accountable. So consider a one-to-one tutor, or just, maybe work with your older brother, or go to a high school, find a tutor, like a peer who's aced the SAT, who's tutoring. But overall, just try to work with somebody one-to-one, or work on your own, but just don't work. You probably don't want to work in a group. Another thing you want to do is make sure if you have a tutor, that tutor sets expectations, homework expectations, and also that the tutor has a personality that's upbeat, because I don't know how you feel, but when I'm not feeling good, feeling lethargic about something, I don't want to hang around somebody who's very stoic or down or negative. I want to hang out with somebody. I want to be with a tutor who is upbeat, positive, makes the material exciting, makes me laugh, that kind of stuff. Also, the tutor needs to make sure you frequently checks in with a student with low motivation, because sometimes low motivation type students have an attitude problem. They just basically are like, okay, I'm at tutoring, it's boring, I'm not going to really enjoy this, and they go into the experience, the tutoring, with a bad attitude, and the tutor needs to frequently check in with that student to make sure the student's held accountable, can reiterate the math problem in his own words. The tutor needs to basically just check in with the student. Are you getting this? Why don't you explain this problem to me in your own words? So it's like a frequent kind of back and forth is what I'm trying to say, between the tutor and the student that will make the session work with a low motivation type student. The tutor needs to, keep things exciting, keep things positive. So the tutor needs to use a lot of positive reinforcement with a low motivation type student, because maybe that student with low motivation doesn't have a very good academic self-esteem for one reason or another. So imagine if you had somebody you're studying with, pat you on the back every so often, just say, hey, good job, keep up, or if you miss a problem, instead of getting down on you and criticizing you, just says, hey, you'll get the next one. Because the SAT really is a marathon, not a sprint. So it's about getting as many questions correctly as possible within the time allotted. It's not getting every question right, but it's just doing as many questions as possible and try to get as many correct as possible. So just kind of, using positive reinforcement, keeping the session moving. And then also, this kind of goes along with frequently checking in with the student to make sure he's retaining the information. It's working on metacognition, which is, you want to be aware of how you think and feel while you're doing these problems, because a lot of these low motivation type students think really negatively while they're doing, say, a math word problem. So what you want to do as a tutor, as a parent, a coach, is work with that student through a math word problem together and process it together, and then in the moment teach strategies in those negative moments. So you can ask the student, for example, How are you feeling, while you're doing these problems? Have the student kind of just like, vent or just kind of, articulate what he feels. He might get a lot of valuable information about how he processes in his mind. So maybe he's like saying something like, this is way too hard. I get tripped up on this stuff. And then that will kind of lead you to maybe steer the tutoring session in a different direction and do like a review session on, fractions or whatever. And then keep it positive and upbeat and just be like, look, you'll get this. You got this. I understand you're frustrated, but just remember, out of 4 answers, there's only one right choice and there's 3 bad choices. So let's like kind of find some evidence to rule out the bad choices first. And the last thing you kind of want, what comes to my mind when working with students with low motivation, is work on their persistence, because a lot of these students are very lethargic, ambivalent, and they run out of steam. They give up too quickly on a problem, especially if it's a multi-step problem. So these students run out of steam. Teach them persistence by using positive reinforcement, and teach them shortcuts and strategies so they can get to the answer a little faster. Also, remember, on SAT day, you're going to get a couple breaks, and you want to coach these students on how to take productive breaks. So instead of having the student kind of like clown around with their friends and get off task and out of and lose their focus and not take the rest of the SAT after break material seriously, teach that student to take a productive break. So teach them to go for a walk down the hallway just to kind of get some exercise, get the blood moving, maybe eat a quick piece of dark chocolate, hydrate, stretch, and come back refreshed. So those are just some of the things that come to my mind when working with students with low motivation. Let me know if you have any questions. This was episode 211, How to Prep Low Motivation Type Students for the SAT. Be on the lookout for our next podcast episode. It'll be number 212 with our next educational expert. And remember to access all of our podcasts. Go to preppedandpolished.com/podcast. Thank you for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.